Good evening everyone. In this video, we will see one more Docker optimization concept which is called multi-stage builds or multi-stage Docker file. So which is very important for optimizing the Docker files. So let's see how we are going to create that lightweighted Docker images by using that multi-stage Docker file or multi-stage builds. Okay. So now basically, if we want to build any application, what we can do? We need one host mission. Just we can do the build, and using that final build outcome, which is called Artifactory, we can create a Docker image. We can push that Docker image to the registry. Then we can pull that image into the wherever it is required. We can create a container and we can run the application. So this is how the normal process will happen. So when coming to that multi-stage build, even this multi-stage build is available in the Docker also earlier. That means there is some different processes there actually. So if you want to create a multi-stage build before, so basically we need to write the two Docker files and we can use them to create a small image. Then that image we can use to create the container and we can run that application. Okay, so now see, the first we can call it as a Dockerfile 1. So this first Docker file for only development that contains everything which is needed for development, such as build tools, development tools, and other files. So example, see here, I have taken one node and I have used a couple of instruction. Just I can build the Docker image. Okay, so here in this Dockerfile 1, what we need to do, just build that application and we can copy that output or artifactory or build output to the host machine. Okay, so when it comes to that Dockerfile 2, which is for only production, that contains the application and only the required tools to need to run the application. Okay, so but here you need to see how we can create the image. Means first what we need to do, so we can use that minimal base image or we can use alpha in base image. Then we can take that build output from the host machine to work directory, and using that we can create that application image. Okay, in that image we are going to deploy it into the container and we can run that application. So this is where we can do the multi-stage build earlier. So simplification is, so Dockerfile 1 will be used for build that application and we can copy the output into the host machine, and Dockerfile 2 will be used for just copy the output from host machine to work directory. Then it will bundled as a image. That final image, it contains only application and required tools to run that application. Okay, so even this process we can automate using shell script also, where we can able to use, first we can build that application, we can copy that output into the host machine in some folder. Then after that we can copy that into that next Dockerfile work directory. Then finally what we have to do, we need to create the final build image. Okay, so this is how the multi-stage build will be happening earlier. Now when comes to that multi-stage build, so this is advanced side of Docker images. Okay, so this is very popular method for optimizing the Docker image, and even the interview perspective also it is very important actually. Okay, so let's see how we can able to create Docker images using this method. Okay, basically let's say I want to create that image for Java application. So as I told, just we need to clone the code from the source code repository and we can build that application. Example, if we can take Java, then after that whatever output we can come using that output, we can call it as an artifactory. So that is called as a binary as well. So now this is where, rather than building it on the build server, then you can get that artifactory and putting that artifact into the image. there is another way that what we can directly do is take the source code of the application and you can compile itself directly inside the Docker image and store the output. So in this case, we don't need dedicated build mission for creating the Docker images, or we can do everything inside the container. So that is where first we will take the latest version of the base image based on our requirement or application, and we will add the source code, and then we do the build or compilation, and then we will create an image on top of the build artifactory, and then we can run that application by creating the container. So that's what we are going to do it now. Okay, so as I told, the first Docker file we can use for that build here. Let's see. So here I have taken multi-stage build. So multi-stage build means in one Docker file we are going to put two stages. So one stage equivalent to one base image and another stage is equivalent to another base image. So the first stage here we can call it as an intermediate stage, or we can call it as a stage 1. The second stage we can call it as a final stage. Okay, first stage, as I told, just we can do the build and we can generate the final outcome, which is called deployable file. Okay, but earlier we are using two Docker files, but in one Docker file we created the two stages actually. Okay, we'll see example. So using one Docker file here, we can do the build and create the container on top of the build. At the same time, you will write another Docker file, then you can create the final Docker image. Instead of maintaining multiple Docker files, or instead of creating multiple images from the separate Docker files, the latest Docker version is introduced one concept which is called multi-stage Docker build. So what is multi-stage Docker build? Instead of creating multiple Docker files, you can combine everything in one Docker file. So that is where there is a instruction we can use, from instruction, which we can use to define the base images, which is equivalent to the one Docker file. Example, if we can write that to from instruction, that we can call it as a two stages we define. So in one Docker file, if we can define that two stages, which is called multi-stage. So the benefit of multi-stage build is we can put in everything into the one Docker file. Then Docker file will understand that you don't need all the layers. Whatever that you are building first, we will be tracked as an intermediate image or intermediate stage. So which is called first stage. This is just for a reference. It will not use for the final image. This is just to store the deployable output, which is called artifactory. So in this intermediate stage, take the base image, then copy the source code and perform the build, then create the final outcome file, which is we can use for the deployment, which is called deployment file. Okay, then it will go to the second stage. So in the second stage, simply refer to the first stage, which is called intermediate stage. Okay, and then it will copy the files whatever we needed. Here automatically Docker will take care of copying from first stage to second stage. You no need to bother about that. If you can just write the instruction using copy instruction, that will be taken care. Then it will take the minimal base image, copy the required files from the first stage, then finally it will create the image. So in the final image has only two layers. One is called alpha in base images, or slim images, which is for the application, slim variant images, and your application files. So layers are very less. Okay, so with two Docker files, manually creating the images and then copy the files by creating the container, you can do everything into the one Docker file. We can do in the one shot. So that's what we can call it as a multi-stage Docker file. Okay, so here we can get the final image. So let's hear one of that example I have captured. So in this Docker file, you can see we can define that three stages actually. So one is called here if you can see base image stage. So here I can define for one of the base image, slim variant base images. Second one is for build stage, just it will build the application, just it will store that file which is called output file. And third one is which is for final image which we can use for the production. So here you can see using copy instruction from build stage I have given. So we can copy from the build stage and we can able to create the final image and we can deploy that. Okay, so that is the benefit of this multi-stage Dockerfile. Let's jump into the practical session. So now see here I have two examples. One is called multi-stage example 1. There are source code and pom.xml and maven commands. Dockerfile is there. So this is for completely on Java application. So if you can open this Dockerfile, now if you can see here, this is the first stage where I am referring the Java is required for that maven. And second thing is, so where we can create that app directory and we can copy the source code. Then after that, we can use that work directory and clean, we can make a package. So this package, we are going to copy into the somewhere here, see. So in the second stage, we are using just referring the first stage from builder. Builder means this is the first stage actually, builder. So we are going to copy that app source target. So this is the work directory. Whenever we can do the build here, it will be created as a target. That jar file we are going to create it as a app. This is called application. So after this, here we are going to run it. So that's what. So if you can go here, so the first stage will be indicated as a just it will build the application and it will store the target folder. It contains the final build output. And that final stage, what we can do, just it will take the target from the target jar file and we can bundle and we can run the application. So that is about this Dockerfile will do. So this stage will be up to build that application and store the target file. And this stage will be refer the build stage and it will copy the output. Okay, so then finally it will create. Let's see how it works. So now what we have to do, Docker images, so nothing will be there. So what we have to do, Docker build, and we can use Java multi. So Java is the image name, multi is the tag, multi1, and we can give that Docker file name. Then I can, sorry, -f, I can give the Docker file. Even if you cannot give that -f, also should take it. Docker build. Docker build, sorry, so I need to give Docker build -t. Docker build -f. So now see, it is going to download that base image first, which is Java. Then after that, it will do that clean and package actually. So it will downloading all the dependencies which is needed. So once that package is done, then after that in the second stage, it will copy that output to the, which is called jar file, and to the second stage, and it will create the image. So now its build is going on. So once this is done, then it will take the build output into the second stage. So see here in this copy from build server. So this is has taken, and finally it will run that application. So this is what from the build. So from the first stage, we can call it as a builder. It is building the job. From here, app source target folder, there is a jar file is available. This is called deployable output. This will be copied into the second stage app.jar. Okay. So now finally the image will be created and it is running successfully. So let's see Docker images if we can verify. Now see, so this is called multi-stage. Now it is has created as a image. Okay, so using this image, we can push this image to the registry and we can pull it in the container and we can create a container actually. Okay, so this is the first example and we can see that second example. So here also clear. So here there is a one application. So if we can open this Docker file. So here what we have to do, I am using first stage as a Maven and second stage we can use Java. Directly we can run that application. So here if you can see, here just I can use that Maven base image, go to the work directory, then copy it and just you can do the package. That means it will create the final outcome, either jar or var. Then in the second stage, I can use that one of the Alpine image and I can put it as a /app as the work directory. And here this will take it. So this will be take it from a app to target. Whenever the build is done, it will create it as a work directory /app/target. From that target, it will going to copy to the current location. Then finally, it will start it actually. Okay, let's see how it works. So just I am doing that copy only here. So I can use the same command. So for building this application, but I can use the okay. So now it is downloading that Maven, and after that, so it is creating that base image is downloaded and it will doing that installation. MVN clean installation is doing. So but make sure that here see the build is success and the second stage is going on actually. So you should have to understand here is, so there are, we can define a multiple stages into the one Docker file instead of defining separate Docker files actually. Now see here it is copied as a, this is copying from stage 1 to stage 2 here actually. That means, and here it will copy it, this will be copied successfully. And finally it will be run it as a hello world. Okay, this is the project actually. Now if you can see Docker images, see here, so multi-app Java image should be created. Okay, so and which is called as a some OpenJDK it will download it, and sorry, this Alpine image it is downloaded and Maven base image it is downloaded. Okay, so if you can open this Docker file, you need to understand there are two stages we define. This is one stage because we used one from instruction. From instruction is equivalent to one stage and another from instruction is equivalent to another stage. Okay, so this is how we can create that Docker images with the optimized way. And you need to see here, multi-stage build is the one of the approach for building the Docker image in the in that instead of having that multiple Docker files, you put the content into the one Docker file, then create the initial stage, which is called as the intermediate stage, then create the final stage and refer the files from the initial stage or first stage, so that whatever you have the final stage, that will be converted into the final Docker image. Then we can create the container on top of the final image and we can run the application. So here you need to know how to define the multi-stage Docker file and how to create the image. Okay, thanks for watching.